All right, let's do this. What's
All right,
going
that's
on,
good.
guys? How's it going? We're live here at Talking Ball Draft Man Standing, episode 9 here, coming off the combine. And so we're just going to be talking NFL draft today. And then, as always, we're going to go into our first round predictions for the Seahawks and Cowboys this week, up to 18 and 19 in the NFL draft here. So, John, without further ado, who do you think improved their stock the most over the
Y-
weekend?
Yeah, I think without question, the guy who improved his stock the most was Shaquem Griffin, the one-handed linebacker edge player from Central Florida. Came in at 6'1", 227, 32 and 1/8 inch arm length, 9-inch hands. But the big number that everyone was talking about, 4.38 40-yard dash. That is fast for any player. That's fast for a cornerback. That's fast for a wide receiver, a running back. To see a linebacker run 4.38, it's kind of surreal. And to see a guy who has one hand run 4.38, obviously you don't need hands to run fast, but it just makes him, a player who has been talked about as maybe a draft guy, maybe a guy who gets picked late in, late in the draft as, a flyer pick, as someone who can maybe do something. Because really, hasn't been a player in the NFL, to my knowledge, who's only had one hand and been, been on a roster and played in actual meaningful snaps. And of course, he did the bench press as well. He did it with a prosthetic hand, his real hand holding one end of the bar, and then a prosthetic one holding the other one. He did 20 reps, no small feat there, a solid broad jump at 117 inches. So Griffin definitely improved his stock, I'd say, and I think he went from a day 3 guy to maybe someone who's going to creep up into maybe the 3rd round. I still have to finish watching all his tape, but at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a pass rush specialist, a guy who's going to play a few snaps a game, not a starter necessarily, not at least right away. I'm not going to doubt this guy. He's come so far and done so much and silenced, all doubts. I'm not going to say he can't be a starter down the line, but I think right away he'll come in as a pass rush specialist and a special teams demon and make his name that way. And I think 3rd round is very realistic for Shaquem Griffin after showing how fast he was at the combine.
Right, right, and what a story, right, for Shaquem Griffin, running the fastest 40 of any defensive player who weighs more than 225 pounds. So, that just, it's remarkable how well he performed at the combine, especially since, he was a late addition to the combine. They weren't even going to
Right.
invite him.
Right,
So,
exactly. And just to bring something up real fast, the most comparable thing I can think of is Jason Pierre-Paul, who lost several fingers on a hand, but he still has a hand. He still has a grip, and he's still a solid player. So I think Griffin, obviously, they're going to need a coaching staff that is going to be patient with him, that is going to have to utilize him in a special way because he's not like other players, both for the good and the bad. But I think down the line he can definitely be an impact player on a defense.
right, right, of course, and Shaquem Griffin was, I think, the star of the weekend, I
Yeah,
would say. But I think there were several other guys who improved their stock. One of which I think a little bit under the radar would be the center prospect James Daniels.
yeah,
Now, he got helped a little bit by the injury to Billy Price during his bench press workout where he tore his pec a couple reps in. But, James Daniels is now the clear cut, to a lot of people, top offensive center prospect. And he performed pretty well, I would say, outside of his bench press numbers, which were, 21 reps. He looked really mobile and had good size numbers, 33, almost 34-inch arms, which is pretty solid for a center prospect. 6'3", 300 pounds, good size, and he performed well in the 3-cone and 20-yard shuttles in terms of his percentiles on mock draftable. So James Daniels, I thought, had a good weekend just by having a little bit of luck, but also performing well throughout his combine.
Yeah, I agree. I think James Daniels definitely also came away as a big winner. He looked so um, he looked so fluid
Yeah,
as a
fluid I
mover.
think is the right word there too.
Yeah, and he's a guy who is gonna like you said with Billy Price being injured, is if not the number one guard, is a top or if not the number one center on people's boards. He's going to be top three, I'd say. So he's going to be, maybe a late day one, day two selection at worst, James Daniels. So definitely, like you said, Jack, another big winner in the combine. Some other guys who played well or who performed well, I should say, at the combine. Maybe not a big surprise, but I would have to say Saquon Barkley definitely
Of
came
course.
out and looked as good as advertised. I've definitely had some issues with him. I don't. I think he's a great player. I think he's a top five player. I don't think he's necessarily the type of back that Todd Gurley or Ezekiel Elliott is, just in terms of complete and overall game with very few weaknesses. But I think Barkley, with his athletic testing numbers, showed that he's a guy who, as long as he's a little more patient at the next level as a runner, he's going to be, Pro Bowl year in and year out.
Yeah, of course, and similarly along that vein, Bradley Chubb had a good combine as well,
Yeah,
and these are guys who were projected to go top five before the combine, and so maybe it's not a total surprise that they performed well, but it's still nice to see they put the numbers out there. They competed. They could have opted to wait until their pro days to do certain tests, but both of these guys went out there, put up good numbers overall. Barkley obviously was phenomenal. Chubb was very good, I thought. The only numbers I think was the three cone, which was a little below average, but that was something that was obvious on tape,
no,
just in terms of when you watched him, in terms of his fluidity. But I think he had a good combine overall and solidified himself as a top five prospect. And that's obviously going to depend on where the quarterbacks go, but he's certainly a top five guy.
yeah, definitely. Now, Jack, what position group do you think had, the best combine overall?
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's the position group I've been covering, but the corners were the corners were phenomenal. I mean, I saw a statistic today which was that, you know, there were, I think, 9 guys who ran a sub 4.40 this year just of the DB group. And last year, that's how many in all of the class ran a sub 4.40. So just the speed of this group was just insane to me. And I thought overall they looked pretty good. But I also want to throw some love to the wide receiver group because I thought there's several guys who are getting a decent amount of buzz after that they went and beforehand. Well, maybe Calvin Ridley didn't have a great performance. Guys like Cortland Sutton and there's a couple other guys as well who had the wide receiver from LSU, John. He had a good
Yep.
performance as well,
Yeah,
and
DJ Chark.
DJ Chark, thank you, and so there's a few guys who I thought were, you know, people were raving about their performances, in the wide receiver class as a whole hasn't been as talked about. What about you? What do you think, John?
I think going from talking about maybe a group that played extremely well to just a group who looked okay were the offensive linemen.
Right.
I think definitely the big winner at offensive line was Colton Miller, the UCLA tackle, who looked, talk about fluid. He looked really fluid, really athletic. Not a big surprise, but still to see a guy who's 6'9", 309, run a 40 and 4.95. A 31 and a half inch vertical, a 10-foot one broad jump. Those are really good numbers for an offensive lineman, indicative of athleticism and a guy who's going to be able to reach speed rushers, who's going to be able to get out and block at the second level for his running backs. So Miller still, very much a not a extremely polished offensive lineman, but a guy who, with his testing, could very much find himself in the first round. And then Jack, a guy who we have disagreed with a lot since his combine, Orlando Brown. I think we should definitely talk about him for a few minutes.
Okay. What do you want to get into, John?
I think I mean, obviously, the viewers are not aware, but in my opinion, I can see people dropping Orlando Brown a few rounds or a round maybe because he had a very bad combine. Let's be honest, he had a terrible combine. And if it's true that he was loafing around in drills and coaches were yelling at him, and
Well,
there's work ethic questions, then
that
I
is
can
true.
see
I don't
a
think
bigger drop.
that is an
Right.
if it is true. That is true.
Okay, so then I can see a bigger drop for Orlando Brown. But just from the testing numbers, personally, I don't think you should drop him that far because on tape you see a guy who's not a second level fluid mover, a guy who's going to get out and reach linebackers, in the blink of an eye and get up to safety level and third level of defense. And he's not that sort of offensive tackle. But I do still think that on tape, his kick slide looks good enough that he's going to be able to reach out and block speed rushers. Obviously the elite guys like Von Miller and Jadeveon Clowney will probably give him issues, but they give just about everybody issues in the NFL. So I think Orlando Brown, probably the worst thing was that his bench press numbers were not very good. I think it was something like 19.
14,
not
John.
great.
14.
14. Okay, that's bad. I mean, but on tape, he's got great power. Maybe, maybe it's overrated because he's playing in the Big 12 and he's playing against college defensive ends, and maybe at the NFL he's just not athletic enough and not powerful enough. But I still think Brown should be a top 50 player drafted. If his interviews were bad and there were some other issues, and he is, I don't know what his body fat came out to, but if it was bad for an offensive lineman, maybe he drops into the third round or maybe even the fourth round. But personally, I disagree that he dropped all the way to the fifth or sixth or seventh round.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that he's gonna go to the fifth or sixth or seventh round, as you're saying. And again, I haven't had necessarily a personal opinion as you have, but rather this is what the facts and what history has told me about these types of performances. And quite frankly, it's more about the work ethic, the signs that, he didn't really improve at all in terms of there's a measurement that they can do for high school athletes in terms of, I'm guessing, like the spark testing. And for that measurement, his strength at high school level would have come out to around 14 reps at the time on the bench press. And the fact that that's unchanged, again, is a major red flag. And, the 40 was really bad, almost 6 seconds. But again, you're not expecting him to perform at a great level. You're just hoping that it's going to be, below average, like a normal below average. And the fact that it was so bad made it noteworthy. And several different NFL writers, reporters, what have you, Matt Miller, Lance Zierlein were reporting on his fall here. And, as Blake is saying here, maybe at his pro day when he's more comfortable, he'll have a better performance. We'll see what happens for the final verdict. But, to me, it really is about the fact that, he had a 2-month period or month and a half period, however long it is since his last game. And, yeah, his 10-yard split was terrible. But, he had that period of time to solely focus on football, to get ready for this. This is basically the biggest interview of his life. And he really squandered that opportunity. And to me, it's more of a character red flag than it is anything to do with his football ability. And as John has said, he has shown decent power on tape. And he definitely performed really well this season for Oklahoma. I don't even know if he was credited with giving up a sack this season. So
no, he didn't.
Yeah, so his fluidity and his ability there, at least at the Big 12 level, was good enough. Now, we'll have to see if it will carry over to the next level, but to me, it would be it would be very difficult for me to get behind drafting him if I were the GM of a team, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, Jack, I think that's the great thing about the NFL draft and the combine even is that we can look at the same player, the same tape, the same workouts and have two different opinions on them. And, ultimately it's going to be figured out on the field, and maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Maybe neither of us are right, and he's a good player, not a great player, or a bad player but not a bust, or somewhere in the middle. So going forward, we'll see about Orlando Brown and some of the other guys who have risen, who have fallen. Obviously, you have guys who have terrible combines and go on to have solid careers, and then you have guys who have amazing combines and go on to do nothing at the next level. So we'll see about that going forward. But let's get into some of the teams now. Moving on here to the Seahawks and the Cowboys, Jack. With the Seahawks picking, what do you think they're going to do? Obviously, some questions on defense and on offense for them. They did miss out on the playoffs this year. Am I right? Yes, they did. So, not a typical thing with the Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson like our Seahawks that they're not in the playoffs.
It's the first time actually that since Russell Wilson's been in the league that they've missed the playoffs. So, this is going to be a banner offseason for this Seahawks team, and I think you could see some significant changes starting at the back end with the Legion of Boom. It wouldn't surprise me if you end up seeing maybe an Earl Thomas or a Richard Sherman moved off of this Seahawks team. And, they are – the thing is with the defense, as the old adage goes, no matter how great your defense is, they will get old. And you're going to have to pay them. And unfortunately for this Seahawks team, it appears to have come up and kind of creeped up and caught them.
Yeah.
Now, they're going to have to make decisions on who they want to keep. They acquired Sheldon Richardson last year from the Jets, and he played really well for them, but they're going to have to make a decision on do they want to pay him. And, Richard Sherman only has a year left on his deal. So, really, I think with this pick at 18, they're going to look to add to their defense. And there's a number of ways they could go. I think they could go to the secondary. And depending on who's available here of the corners, it could be a nice pickup for them here at 18 to add another corner to go with Shaquille Griffin. Shakem's brother. I may have just butchered his name. I apologize. But, I think that is a direction they could go. And they could go, maybe Josh Jackson's still there. I don't know if he'll be there. I don't see Denzel Ward being available. Maybe Isaiah Oliver, although I think it's a bit early for him. My personal favorite would be Jair Alexander, but I don't see that happening here. So I think it's going to be, either I think it's going to be the defensive line. But, having said all of this, it would be great if the Seahawks were to go out and finally add an offensive lineman who's ready to play day one. Based on their track record, I don't see that happening here. So I think it's going to be a defensive lineman, possibly, Vita Vea, the run-stuffing defensive tackle from Washington. That would be intriguing as a guy who goes there. But in an ideal world, for the Seahawks, they would go either Will Hernandez or maybe Isaiah Wynn. But I also wouldn't throw out wouldn't pass the idea of Daron Payne. While he may not be as high level as a prospect as Vita Vea, I think we've seen, with the Seahawks drafting Jerron Reed and several other Bama prospects in recent years that they have a preference for Bama guys, and he's definitely, since the playoff, has moved up draft boards, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy there as well. But I think it's going to be more of an interior defensive lineman, but I would hope it's an interior offensive lineman.
Yeah, I think they definitely need to. I think the Seahawks have enough holes on that defense, surprisingly, all of a sudden, with, like you said, salary cap. They're talking about trying to move Martellus Bennett. So I think if they tried to do that, edge rusher could potentially be on the table. Someone like Harold Landry or Marcus Davenport, Lorenzo Carter, who could be an edge player or a linebacker. The guy I think would be perfect for the Seahawks, would be too perfect for the Seahawks, is Carlton Davis, the Auburn cornerback. Big, long, rangy guy, perfectly fits the the prototype of what the Seahawks look for in the cornerback. So I think Davis would just be, a slam dunk home run pick for them.
The only thing with Davis is he just doesn't force turnovers.
Yes, that's true.
And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing for a corner, as Davis is a very, very good press man corner, and as John said, would fit the Seahawks scheme very well. But the only thing is, I just worry that their defense just wouldn't be able to, while they would be solid, I think it'd be more of a bend but not break style of defense, especially if they were to get a guy like Davis, that would signal that maybe Sherman is on his way out.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would give them someone to pair next to Shaquille Griffin once Richard Sherman's time there is ultimately done. If Earl Thomas winds up moving, they could look at safety, although I don't think there's really a safety worth taking once Derwin James and Minka Fitzpatrick are off the board, and I expect both of them to be at this point. But yeah, I mean, personally, I'm a fan of Carlton Davis's. Will Hernandez, like you said, Jack, would be another great pick for them. An interior lineman, I could see going like someone like Vita Vea. Jerron Reed he's been okay, hasn't been great. Malik McDowell didn't really have a good rookie year. Nas Jones looked pretty good as
I like Nas Jones.
Third or fourth round pick. Yeah. He's definitely a good, solid pass rushing interior disruptor, but they still need that one stuffing defensive lineman. So I think Vea could potentially be the guy, or like you said, Jack Deron Payne as well.
Right. John, have you seen any of Justin Reed? Blake is asking about him.
From Stanford, their safety there. I haven't seen any Justin Reed. I have seen Quentin Meeks. From Stanford, their corner. But I have not seen any Justin Reed, unfortunately, no.
All right. Well, so I think that wraps it up there for the Seahawks. So what do you think about the Cowboys pick here, John?
Yeah, the Cowboys, they're another one of these teams that needs a wide receiver badly. I mean, Des Bryant, it seems like with each day that passes, there's a less and less likely chance that he'll be on the team come 2018, opening day. So they really need a wide receiver, but I don't think there's one worth taking at mid first round once Calvert-Lee's off the board. The next guy I have is Equanimeous St. Brown, the Notre Dame wide receiver, who's a little more polished, I think, than people are giving him credit for, but I still think he'd be a little bit of a reach for the Cowboys from where they're picking. Auden Tate is another guy that I've been high on, but his combine was pretty bad. He looked pretty slow, so he's definitely going to have to answer questions about whether his great route running skills are enough for him to separate at the next level, and he might not be a guy you want to take in the first round. But otherwise, one player I have seen a lot of Cowboys fans clamor for is Will Hernandez. They really want Will Hernandez. Slap him over at left guard between Travis Frederick and Tyron Smith, and just finish off that great wall at Dallas, really, with Smith, Hernandez, Frederick, Zach Martin, and Lyle Collins at right tackle. So I think that would be an intriguing selection if Hernandez is still there. Isaiah Wynn could be another potential guy if they want to continue to solidify that offensive line. But I kind of think it's overkill to take another offensive lineman when they do have needs elsewhere. I think defensive line, they're pretty well set. They could look for an interior guy like the Seahawks. So they could be another one of those teams looking for Vita Vea, Deron Payne, some of the other defensive linemen. Maybe not someone like Taven Bryan, the Florida guy, because he is more of a 3-tech than a 0 or 1-tech, which is kind of what the Cowboys would be looking for. Maurice Hurst Jr. wouldn't be a bad pick, but after his heart issue that came up at the NFL Combine, we'll have to see what his playing future is. But if he's still available, I think he would be a solid pick for the Cowboys. Otherwise, Maybe adding, just one more corner, adding a true number one cornerback. They have some solid guys down there in Dallas with Jordan Lewis, and I'm blanking on the other corner they got last year who played well. Chidobe Awuzie, and Anthony Brown, who kind of took a step backward, but, he's still around. But they don't really have, in my mind, a number one corner. So they're, like we mentioned with the Seahawks, guys like Carlton Davis, Jair Alexander, potentially Mike Hughes, if he's still available, he could be the pick for Dallas. But those are some of the guys I think that would make the most sense for Dallas. Unfortunately, some of their biggest needs, wide receiver, tight end, linebacker, there just aren't a great number of guys at those positions this year that are really going to be able to help them moving forward.
Yeah, there's two names though that I do think would be in consideration for them at 19 at the wide receiver position. I think Cortland Sutton. I think he tested well. Showed his 3-cone time was really impressive. I think it was like a 6.6 or 6.7, and for a guy with his size to have a 3-cone with that speed is phenomenal. And the other guy is, as Blake said, DJ Moore, who definitely had a very good combine as well. Do you think, though, I know you said Aquanius St. Brown was your next wide receiver, but do you think either of those two guys would be under consideration?
I definitely think they would. I'm definitely not as high on them as most NFL draft people are right now. But considering their needed wide receiver, especially if Des Bryant does find himself traded or released, they're going to almost be forced to reach to grab a wide receiver, because otherwise you're left with Ryan Switzer, Cole Beasley, Terrence Williams, Noah Brown. You do not have a clear number one wide receiver, and if you don't, then all you have to do is if you're the defense, is put 9 guys in the box and dare Dak Prescott to throw it to someone who, to 30 whatever year old Jason Witten, or one of these other guys who are just backup complimentary tier wide receivers.
Right, and we've seen without Zeke how that Dallas offense has looked. So in effect, that would be playing without Zeke if defenses are able to do that.
Right, exactly.
With that being said, that's it for Week 9 of Draft Man Standing. We'll catch you guys next week for our 10th episode here.